Hello again, everyone. With some of the questions that I got, one of them was directed towards my wife. So this is Rusfear Core. And the question I got for her was, why did your wife go back to Sikhi after being Seventh-day Adventist? So here she is, and she's going to answer it.
Thank you for asking that question. So firstly, I just want to say that these are my experiences and my opinions of two different faith systems that were a big part of my life for many years. And everybody has their own experiences that shape their lives. So this is just mine. So briefly, I left home when I was 17 after many years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And of course, I became very disenchanted with Sikhi. To me, I put the two and two together that the dysfunction and the abuse and the trauma was because of the faith. My family is a very devout and conservative initiated Sikhs, and was a very close-knit Sikh community that I was a part of. So I left home when I was 17. I had a friend that was an Adventist that shared the message with me. I started going to church. I became a baptized Adventist. I became a Sabbath school teacher. At one point, I was the youth director. I was invited to speak at different churches. I went to an Adventist high school and an Adventist university. All that to say that I didn't become an Adventist for convenience. I was completely immersed in it and wanting to learn as much as possible because it seemed very similar to Sikhi to me in the sense of it being a works-based religion in the way that there is, Sabbath keeping or keeping the commandments or of do's and don'ts. That seemed easy to me. That was an easy enough way for me to check off all the boxes and know that my salvation was secured. The key difference being, of course, that there was this concept of a loving God and of forgiveness and of redemption and of salvation being available to me. And of course, also judgment for the abusers that hurt me for so many years. So that was incredibly attractive to me. I was at the General Conference in 2000. It was, just a completely transformative experience for me at that time. There was so many similarities to me as a new Adventist coming from Sikhi. They're both very insulated communities, not always in the same way, but because there's so many things that you do as a Sikh or you do as an Adventist, it's very apparent to people around you if you slip up. So if you see a turban bearded Sikh that has a beer in his hand, immediately you know that that's a huge faux pas and that person is not keeping their Sikhi the way that they are supposed to. And the same thing within, as within the Adventist community is, if you were to see someone at a restaurant on a Sabbath afternoon, for some Adventists that would be totally fine, and for others it would be a big deal that they were out at a restaurant on Sabbath afternoon. So, each community, whether it's progressive or more conservative or not, the doctrine and the theology is the same. And it was just, it happens the same way in the Sikh diaspora too of, my family's from the UK. The way that we practice Sikhi growing up is very different than a community that's in British Columbia here in Canada or in Northern California or, in different parts of the world, that it's practiced differently. I know that, even if they're, a couple of generations into being Eastern European Adventist versus, a couple of generations into being Jamaican or from the islands or whatever Adventist, that it was different, but that my experience was with both sides. Because, as I said, I went to an Adventist high school, an Adventist university. I worked for an Adventist university after that. And so it was easy for me. I was in a very difficult time in my life. I was 17 years old. I was on welfare. I lived in abject poverty, didn't have a high school education, had incredible trauma to work through. And at that time, if I could at least secure my salvation after everything else in my life had gone to pits, that was great for me. Over the years, as I worked through more and more of that trauma, and with professional help and letting time heal as well, it became more important to me to have my family in my life, as far as these distant family members that had become estranged to me, like my younger brothers, for example. And it challenged me on my deep-seated belief was that I was a part of this elite remnant group that was saved, and that unless you accepted this message, and unless you did all of these things, and unless this is what you held true in your heart, that you weren't saved. And at the time, I had a 6-year-old baby brother, and I was thinking to myself, how can I actually believe that I'm saved and he's not? And I asked questions. I asked my pastor. I asked a lot of people. And the answer is sort of always in that moment, well, only God knows their heart, and only God can judge, and only God can make that final decision. We always hear about, people in God's kingdom, someone would walk up to Christ and say, "What happened to your hands?" Meaning that there would be people there that had never heard of Christ and would be saved, so that there was still hope for someone like my 6-year-old baby brother. Then as the time went on, I was thinking, well, that's for a 6-year-old child. What if it's somebody who is a really good person, or they have their own faith that they practice, and are they not going to go because it's not this, other Christians, but they're not Adventists? Can they go? And it seemed that when I was with an Adventist who knew me personally, then the answer was very different than someone who would just theologically say, well, it is what it is, and you're either going or you're not, and here's the sort of the rubric, if you want, of how to measure if you're going to go or not. The idea of the investigative judgment, or the book of life, and the remnant church and things were in stark contrast to friends that I had that I knew would not be going in that, according to that. So I think one of the finite moments that I can pinpoint was that Tegh was coming home from Afghanistan. We'd already knew that we were going to settle down and we were going to get married. And I asked my pastor at church if we could get married there, and was told that we couldn't get married there until he was baptized. And I understand completely that, that's just the way it is. The Catholic Church, the Sikh faith as well, like interfaith marriages are a big deal. And, for them to say not unless he's baptized, fair. However, at that point for me, I realized that my relationship with my church family was separate from my relationship with him, and from my brother, and from all these other people who I loved so dearly, but that weren't in with the other part of my life. And you have two different groups of people in your life that you love so much, and there's only one group that you're going to see when this world is gone, or when you die, or however you want to say it. And that was hard for me. He was my best friend at the time. He was the most important person in my life. We knew we were going to start a family together, so why can't he also come to heaven with me? Because he's not an Adventist. He's not a baptized Adventist. I had well-meaning people tell me that they wished that I was in heaven one day with or without him. And that's unfathomable to me, to think that I could exist in any dimension, I guess, without him, because he's everything to me. When we got married, it was actually a retired Adventist pastor that married us, and he was very open to having these kinds of conversations, where I was already sort of 1 foot out and had a bunch of questions, and was kind of thinking, this doesn't really make sense to me. he said, so what about when you have kids? How is that going to work? What are you going to raise them with? And I thought, well, I mean, I was raised as a Sikh. I guess I would just share that with them, and then a little bit of our, mutually shared Christian experience, and just let them make their own decisions. So when we were married, we were going to church on Sabbath, and we were also going to gurdwaras if there were special occasions, if there was, a big holiday. We were both learning about it as we went so that we could explain this to our kids one day. And about 2014 is when I think we both had our very meaningful and transformative experience with really learning that Sikhi is not the way that I learned it as a child. And starting to learn the language ourselves so that we could read the scriptures for ourselves is empowering and eye-opening. Starting to have healthy relationships with other Sikhs that were outside of the system that I was a part of, that was very closed and abusive and hurtful. And that also helped a lot. So I had a lot of questions coming into it. It was a lot of undoing, what about this? Or I was told this is true, or doesn't it say this? And not getting answers from one person in particular, but being given the keys, I guess, to go read it yourself. It's right there. And, in every faith, I think this is true, that we weaponize scriptures to, to fit sort of whatever agenda, I guess it is. If it's, women's rights, or if it's, how to keep certain parts of the religion, or, tangible things that you should or should not do. So for me, reading it myself or understanding the history for myself was a big deal, and it really helped. Over the years then, I became more and more aligned with the concept of grace being universal, of us all being a part of one divine being, and that we all had an equal opportunity to unite with that divine being. Not in some sort of meditation experience or something like that, but that we have in our daily prayers every evening, there's a line in our prayers where we say Gobind Melaniki e Teri Bariya, where we say this moment, this breath, and this life is your opportunity to meet the one. And Tegh and I do a lot of work with the transient population here in Calgary, and you can't help but meet somebody who, Tegh and I have both had these experiences and having a rough go at life during different times of our lives. So when you meet that person and you feel like you've known them forever, and you genuinely want to help them and see them again and know that they're doing better, or invest in their tomorrow, versus trying to just save them. And it's very different now how we do Seva now compared to when I was an Adventist. It's more fulfilling for me. And the concept of Ikonkar, which is the first part of our scripture, meaning that there is only one creator, to really truly practice that and have that in your heart, to know that we are all in this together, was very, I don't know the word I would have for that. It changed me to see that nobody was better or worse off. Nobody had a shortcut to get to heaven or the afterlife or salvation, that we are all doing the very best we can with what we have. And that was very important to me. It's given me more purpose in my life. It's helped me hugely with resolving the trauma from my past. Instead of thinking just, one day they'll have their day of reckoning, or one day this will happen to them, or that, I won't have to share heaven with them because they won't be there. Instead, to also think, it's very possible that, by now they've worked through it, or, my forgiving them will help them move through something, or whatever the case is, that it's not I guess what I'm saying is my relationship with the Creator is more lateral than just vertical. You know, it's not just I'm only concerned with what happens to me when I die and my relationship with God. It's everybody around me is part of that journey for me. You're either helping me become a better person, you're shaping me and you're wanting me to do better every day, or you're challenging me in a way that questions something that I need to resolve and work through and still ultimately become better and do better for everybody else around me. So in a very long-winded way, I apologize for how long this video is. I just saw how long I've been talking. I'm welcome to, anybody's welcome to message me or reach out. I think they all have Tegh's information, but if anybody wants to talk or has other questions about this, it's, I'm happy to discuss it. And that's just, again, what's been my experience and what's worked for me. And yeah, I thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about my journey and appreciate the question. So thank you again for that.
All right, thank you.